Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of Cutting Through. I'm Mitchell Plitnick, the president of Rethinking Foreign Policy and the author of the Cutting Through newsletter on Substack. You can subscribe to Cutting Through at mitchellplitnick.substack.com, where you can also donate to support this work. If you find this valuable, please like and share Cutting Through with your friends and contacts. We can't do this without your support. Today, as I'm speaking, I don't know when you're watching, but today is the 8th day of Elul on the Jewish calendar. Now, Elul is a very important month in the Jewish tradition. It's a time of reflection and of drawing oneself closer to God. More specifically, it begins a time of repentance that leads up to the Day of Judgment on Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, the 10 days of awe, the Yamim Noraim, and finally the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. In Elul, we repent, and in some Jewish traditions, the month itself, the spelling of it, Elul, is also an acronym for Ani L'Dodi V'Dodi Li, which means I am for my beloved and my beloved is for me. It's a traditional Jewish wedding vow. It's actually the inscription I have on my own wedding ring, in fact. In terms of when we think about it in terms of the month of Elul, the spouse is God, right? So it's a more positive, I think, spin on the idea of sort of taking stock, reflecting, trying to make yourself better by addressing the things that you did wrong, and trying to not just acknowledge them, but make up for them if you can, and thereby bringing yourself to greater spiritual awareness, closer to God, however that is interpreted by the individual. Jews at the morning services during the week, every day but Saturday during Elul, blow the shofar. The shofar is blown so that during Elul, it's blown so that we feel our spirits roused to take spiritual stock of ourselves and to begin the process of repentance ahead of the High Holy Days, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So part of this tradition is to survey our own hearts and to find out whom we may have wronged in the past year, seek them out and apologize to them. That's the key thing. The key is the offering that apology, acknowledging the wrong and asking for forgiveness. Whether they forgive you or not is a different matter. The point is that you do it and mean it, and it's not about feeling in that sense feeling better about yourself. It's about actually taking stock and trying to do something. It's not about, oh, okay, now I have to apologize so they won't be mad at me. It's actually acknowledging that you did wrong. And that's the hard thing to do. People apologize for things all the time. I mean, we've gotten so used to the public apology. Those of us who follow sports see this all the time. This public apology, which is scripted, and we've heard the same words before. We hear it from politicians who get caught doing something. And we know it's not about that. It's about putting out something, it's a bit self-effacing, but you're doing it out of selfish reasons. And that's not what this process is about. This is about really acknowledging the wrong and, seeing what you can do about it. It may be that you can't do anything about it. Maybe that whoever you wronged is so mad at you that they will not accept the apology. They're not going to accept any acts of contrition, anything to make up for it. You do your best. If they will accept those things, do them. Now, Elul and that whole process, this is not just an individual matter, although it is that. Very much is personal and introspective, but it's also collective because we do a lot of the things that, for example, blowing the shofar. We do this in a collective, in a minyan. Why do we do that? Well, we do that because there is also a collective aspect to this. And that, I think, for Jews of conscience now has got to lead to the key question, which is how do we avoid this time of self-reflection? How do we avoid this time of atonement and penitence when there is a genocide going on that is cruel even by the standards of genocide? One can argue this one is worse than that one or whatever, but I mean, there is a cruelty to this genocide that is stunning, um, that is historic, frankly, uh, and that is horrifying. And even if that wasn't the case, genocide, of course, is bad enough by itself. Um, but how do we do that? How do we reconcile a process of repentance? And especially for those of us who have been opposing this genocide as Jews and been doing so publicly. Well, how do we approach it when, we know our that there's a part of our collective? Look, we can, you know, people can call themselves anti-Zionist Jews. They can call themselves this, that, or the other. They can try and distance themselves from the overall Jewish community. But the fact is, we are all part of that community. We are all part of that people. And I know that doesn't sit well with some folks. It doesn't sit well with folks who oppose the genocide. It doesn't fit well with many folks who are Zionists, who see themselves as if you're not as defining Judaism through their Zionism, and if you're not Zionist, then you have rejected Judaism in their eyes, and you are not part of the community in their eyes. But sorry, they're wrong. We're all part of the community. Like it or not, that is what community means. Community isn't a litmus test where you say, if you believe as I believe, then we are part of the same community. Community means there is something we have in common, and that binds us together, regardless of how sometimes diametrically opposed our beliefs may be. So, I reject that notion that um, that anti-Zionist Jews can say, well, we're a different Jewish community or we're a separate Jewish. We're not. And for many of us, certainly myself, uh, we couldn't do that's just unrealistic because we have, we're from families. My family, my birth family, is entirely supportive of this genocide in a monstrous way, to the point that I have disconnected myself from them on a personal level. Doesn't change the fact that we're still family. I could never speak to them again. They could never speak to me again. We're still family, whether we like it or not. Um, so how do we approach this? How do we, as Jews of conscience, then think about it? Look, it is certainly the case, as much as we are maybe all one community, yes, but every Jew does not bear responsibility for the war crimes of the state of Israel. I will absolutely reject anyone who tells me that I am responsible for Israel's crimes. You know, um, Professionally and personally, I have been active and public in opposing these crimes, not just the genocide, but the apartheid and the settler colonialism and all of the different ways that Israel has acted against Palestinians. I have been, out there and with so many wonderful colleagues and friends and people I've come to think of as family over the years. Um, there is no question that people who have been opposing these crimes cannot be held responsible for them by definition. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that I am disconnected from those crimes. And more to the point, the fact that, yes, you can't blame individual Jews or even Jews outside of Israel necessarily for Israel's actions. Israel isn't acting on its own. Israel is not doing these things by itself. I may not be Israeli, but I'm Jewish, and the genocide is being done in my name, whether I like that or not. I can say not in my name all I want, and it means something, and it's important to say that, to reject that idea. But there's still the reality that they're doing it in my name, whether I reject it or not. Um, and the fact is, that Jews like myself don't have the power to stop them. Israel is using not only doing these things in my name, but they're using the defense of Jews against anti-Semitism as an excuse for the genocide and as a shield to deflect criticism and potential action to stop that genocide. In effect, they're using me to do that, me and every other Jew. Many Jews are fine with that. Many Jews are not. Doesn't change the fact that that's what Israel's doing, and therefore I am not uninvolved. I'm also part of the American Jewish community. Now, my section of that community works tirelessly to stop the genocide. But the mainstream, and let's face it, it's still to this day, this is, I think, changing, and I think the future is going to look different. But for right now, that mainstream, that legacy Jewish community, that's the part that has the power. They have the money, they have the resources, they have the connections in Washington and in Jerusalem. They're the ones that have the power. And they are in absolute lockstep. Oh, they may, say this or that when they're realizing that they're, that things have gotten so bad. The starvation has been a problem for that part of the community. But fundamentally, they're not telling Israel to stop. They may be saying, well, let more humanitarian aid get in. In other words, change the parameters of the genocide. They're not saying stop it. And parts of that community are absolutely for all of this. One doesn't have to look far. We see the statements all the time from people. We hear them. Those of us in a Jewish community hear them. Those of us on social media hear them. They are putting out propaganda. They're putting out flat out lies about what's going on. They are lobbying in Congress to tell people not to take action against Israel. They're lobbying not just here in Congress. There are communities in Europe, in the UK as well, taking those actions. They're out there and intimidating and hurting people who are advocating for nothing more than basic humanity, basic universal values that are supposed to be rooted in our community, among others, not uniquely rooted in our community, but that's supposed to be what, American Jews have hung our collective hats on for decades. How then do Jewish opponents of genocide atone for that? Well, obviously we can't. I can't atone for the sins that I'm not personally committing, and yet I'm part of a community that is committing those sins, and I refuse to deny that. I refuse to shirk that responsibility. So one of the things obviously we do is to call it out and to try and stop it, to do what we can. Messages like this one are part of my way of doing that, as is, my advocacy work. I work with a number of different organizations here in the Washington, D.C. area and nationally to change our policy. But we know that's an uphill battle, and we know that even if we win, it's going to take far too long to stop this genocide. And that brings me to another point, about being an American Jew. I'm an American. My tax dollars are what make the genocide possible, regardless of whether I want them to, and even if I resist it. You know, even if you go on a tax strike, you're still generating revenue just by living in America as a citizen. You're still generating revenue that goes into the coffers that helps support this genocide. There's no way around it. And the truth is, this is one of the most obscene and just horribly distressing parts of this genocide, because I speak as a Jewish American, but what about Palestinian Americans? Palestinian Americans are literally paying taxes that go to kill their families, in some cases in the triple digits, numbers of members of their family in Gaza. Can you imagine that? Just think about that. You're paying taxes. You pay your taxes here in the United States. They're withheld from your paycheck. It's not like you can stop it. And that money is killing, literally buying the bombs and the bullets that are killing your family. I mean, that is a monstrous obscenity. So what do we do? Where do we go from there? What does it mean um, for Jews in Israel, outside of Israel, and what does it mean for Israelis and Israel itself to apologize to Palestinians? I mean, obviously, there's no apology. If you're part of the genocide, there's no apology until the genocide stops. That's first of all. But there's also, if we're going to do honest reflections, which is again, we go back to where I started all this. This is what Elul is all about: is doing these honest reflections. And if we're going to do that, this genocide is not an isolated incident. It's the latest chapter of a century of dispossession, degradation, dehumanization, and the denial of basic rights to Palestinians. It's been a century of colonization, of apartheid, and of occupation. It's been a century of both the direct violence of soldiers, settlers, guns, bulldozers destroying homes, but also the bureaucratic violence of just setting up laws that restrict Palestinian life in such a way as very, very few Palestinians have any hope for for their own futures and the futures of their children. And what do you think that breeds? What sense does that give to Palestinians? What does it make them? It makes them desperate. And so some will argue about October 7th or other Palestinian attacks that are, certainly criminal acts and terrible acts, but they're also acts that are entirely typical and to be expected, not justified necessarily, but expected of stateless, oppressed, dispossessed people, whether that's in response to European colonization of the Americas, the chattel slave trade, or any other similar cases throughout history. We've seen many of them. This is what desperate people do because they have no choice. And it's especially true in the case of Palestinians because Israel and the United States have blocked every single diplomatic route and nonviolent route to settling these issues. And saying that, well, only direct dialogue between Israel and Palestine and the Palestinian Authority or the PLO can resolve the issue, but that can't resolve the issue. How could it possibly resolve the issue? You're talking about, on one side, a very powerful state backed by the world's greatest military superpower and one of its biggest economies. And on the other side, a completely stateless people who have no real allies that they can count on. They have people who give them lip service. They have people who use their cause as rallying cries for their own interests. But they have no real allies. And, those they do have no power. So, Israel and the United States are both well aware of this dynamic. So, these things can't happen. So what does it mean, again, to apologize to Palestinians? Let's say the genocide ends. As we say, you say it, Muslims say, Inshallah, we say, Im Yotah Hashem. But let's say it ended tomorrow. Please let it be so. Let's say it did with whatever arrangements. But then, you try and reconcile. You try and there are Israelis. I mean, there, certainly as much as there are, you see polls. You saw the most recent poll, which said that 79% of Israeli Jews did not care, basically, about what was going on in Gaza, outside of their interest in the hostages and the so-called war to stop. They didn't care about the starvation in Gaza, but that's still 20% who do. Okay, that's still a decent number. This is still a number of people. That is still a number of people in the seven figures that matter and that would want to make amends. And many Israelis had Palestinian friends before all this started, and even some not necessarily in Gaza, but in certainly in the West Bank. It is not as much as Israel has tried to change that. It used to be much more common, but it is certainly not unknown even now. But how do we expect to atone for this? How do you even begin to apologize for it? I mean, the point again of Elul and the High Holy Days in general is penitence and reflection, looking at what you've done and trying to come out better than you were before as the person who did that thing. And I look at that on a personal level, but I also can't avoid thinking about it in terms of this genocide. Um, and apologizing, and by apologizing, we're going to be talking. We talk about reparations. We're talking about bringing war criminals to justice. We're talking about truth and reconciliation committees. And really bringing out a lot of these things and holding people to account in ways that unfortunately we have not shown collectively as humanity a whole lot of skill at doing, but it is still what we need to do because it is up to, of course, even if Jews and Israelis are sincere in apologies to the Palestinians, and even if they try to take the steps that are necessary to take, how do you forgive this? How do you forget this? You know, many Jews still have not forgiven Germans, and still think, of Germans as Nazis. Believe me, I've encountered that. Some, more than happy to take all the support from Germany, but that's still the way they think about them, and that's perfectly understandable. And I don't think this ever goes away in that sense. But there has to be a way and to move forward. A couple of months ago, I hosted a panel for another organization. And the panelists, three speakers, were all Palestinians. Um, Two of them were still living in Palestine, one living in the United States. And I asked one of them, how, how do we move past this? How can we move past this? How can Palestinians ever forget what's been done to them? Um, and he said to me publicly, this was on the panel, he said, Palestinians are very forgiving people. And I very much want to believe that is true, but Palestinians ultimately are people. So it is very, very hard to see. It will take a very long time. If this was a daunting task before October 7th, it is far more daunting now. And it's going to get worse because let's face it, the genocide is not ending tomorrow. Neither are Israeli policies that are going to spread into the West Bank and disrupt the region beyond that. I don't know where this ends. What I do know is that as a Jew personally, I have to do the self-reflection, and I have to do not only the self-reflection into myself, but I have to do the self-reflection into my whole community. And sure, I can get on my high horse as I am, and as I've done, and I don't apologize for this, and say, if you can't oppose this genocide, you have on a personal level, you have no place in my life. And I have said this to people, frankly, the people outside my wife and my son, uh, I've said this to the people I love the most, and I stand by it. I don't regret it. If you can't oppose this genocide, who are you? Who are you? Um, but it doesn't change the fact that I'm still part of that family and I'm still part of that community. And we have to do what we can to bring about the reconciliation. Uh, it That is what Elul is all about. The idea is to bringing ourselves closer to God, and that's a reality that even those like myself, I am not a believer in God. I am not a religious person. I know a lot about this. I have come actually in my my older years now. I've come to embrace a lot of the traditions of Judaism, and find traditional Judaism to have some very lovely things about it, and some very interesting things about it. But I don't believe in God. This is the simple fact of the matter. I don't believe in God. I don't believe any of this is divine. I believe there's a lot of traditions. Um, but it doesn't matter because it's not. So for me, it's not bringing myself closer to God. It's bringing myself closer to an ideal of humanity that I do hold, an ideal of humanity that I believe in, because I believe we're better than this. I believe we're better than not just genocide. I mean, obviously, we have to be better than genocide, or we're going to die as a race. It's not going to end with Israel and Palestinians. It didn't end with Germans and Jews and queers and communists and all the other people the Germans slaughtered just for who they were. We've seen it, whether it's in Rwanda, Srebrenica, Armenia. We've seen, the entire Western Hemisphere and the native peoples here, the African slave trade. We've seen so many different examples of this barbarism. Eventually, we are going to kill ourselves if we don't stop it, because we're getting to a point where we're getting much, much better at it, and our memories about it are even longer than they used to be. So, um, we have to find a way to get closer to that collective humanity. Because if we don't, it will lead to our destruction. And so what we're seeing in Gaza right now is a symptom of that. And the question is, can we move past it? We're going to have to. But before we can move past it, obviously, we have to stop it. We have to stop this barbarity. We have to stop this monstrosity. And we have to stop the hate that we are feeding into. And, again, Israel and what they're doing in Gaza and in the West Bank and, the crimes they're committing right now as we speak in Lebanon, in Syria, throughout the region are serious. They are planting the seeds of a major, major conflagration. And, we all, as humanity, we all may pay for it, but it won't end here. It never ends here. If it's not Israel, it will be someone else. If it's not the Palestinians who are being killed, it will be someone else. This is what happens until we embrace that collective humanity. There are ways to do it. There are ways to care for one another. People have done this on a local level and on a personal level. Well, we have to do it on a collective level and on a global level. And I think, that's the sort of thing we've tried to do with international laws and, but then again, everybody comes in with their own interests and messes it up. But I think there's ways to be better. It's long, long range. It's a long, long-term fight. But what I can say right now is that there has never been a genocide that has been so openly and brazenly declared by those committing it, has been broadcast to the entire world for all of us to see, and yet is still denied by so many millions of people, and especially by so many people in power. Now, some of the millions of people are stupid and being duped and are just believing what they want to believe, but the people in power know, and they're just lying. And it needs to be confronted, and we need to stop this. And one thing that we can look at in the coming days will be the global smooth flotilla, which Israel has now. Israel's security minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has declared that he's going to treat those people as terrorists. So we'll see where that goes and what happens there. But we need to support those folks with everything we can do. We need to support every action we can take to stop this genocide because it is a monstrosity. And it didn't come out of nowhere, and it didn't come out of October 7th either. Okay, it came out of a century of settler colonialism, 3/4 of a century of apartheid, and of the dehumanization and degradation of the Palestinian people. And if we cannot find a way to stop this genocide before it reaches its apex, there will be more like it. And inevitably, that sort of dynamic will lead to our global destruction. But if we can find a way to stop it, even now, even with all that's happened, even with all the death and destruction, if we can find a way to stop it before Israel can get as far as it may end up going, which is to say, completing the job in Gaza and moving on to the West Bank, then I think we'll have some hope. I think we'll have some hope for the future, and I think we'll have something. Maybe Palestine, and it is lost, but the world can be saved by Palestinians and how they move forward out of these ashes. There was a book written by the former Speaker of the Knesset, Avram Berg. And in English, the title was, I believe it was something along the lines of "The Holocaust is over, we must rise from its ashes." It's a kind of an awkward title. I think sounds a little preachy. But in Hebrew, the title was "L'Natzeach Hitler," to defeat Hitler, or defeating Hitler. Defeating Hitler is probably how it would best be translated. And it's much more simple. It's the one they should have kept. But I suppose publishers must have thought that it would be like a book on, I don't know, how the war was won or something. But it's a more simple title, and it's a real title. It matters because the effects of Hitler are still being felt by Jews, and it has turned a segment, not all of us by any means, but a segment, and an important segment and a large segment of our community into the genocide errors we're seeing acting in Gaza. And we can stop it. And if we do stop it, I think that brings hope, not just to Palestinians, which is the most important thing right now, but I think hope for all humanity. So with that, I'll leave you there. Please, as I said, like, share, and subscribe. I cannot, and none of us can do this without supporting each other. I can't do this without your support. So please, if you can, make a donation at mitchellplotnick.substack.com. Or if you can't, just like, subscribe, share this with your friends, spread the word, and I will talk to you soon.